Today, I've announced 5 new measures. We're protecting jobs through the new Jobs Support Scheme. The government will directly support the wages of people in work, giving businesses who face depressed demand through the difficult winter months the option of keeping employees in a job on shorter hours, rather than making them redundant. We're also extending the self-employed scheme to sit alongside that. And I've announced a range of measures to ease cash flow concerns for businesses, allowing them to focus on protecting jobs. Pay as you grow will ease the repayment terms for bounce-back loans. We're giving people more time to pay back their deferred taxes, and I'm cancelling the planned increase in VAT for hospitality and tourism through to the end of March. I know people are anxious and afraid right now, but I want them to know that we have a plan to protect jobs and support businesses. And what was true at the beginning of this crisis remains true. It's on all of us to get through this together.
Let's take a look at those measures first announced in the Commons this afternoon. The Jobs Support Scheme will begin in November and run for 6 months. Employees in smaller or struggling businesses who are working reduced hours will get a third of their lost salary topped up by the government. The Self-Employment Income Support Scheme has also been extended. And there's a pay-as-you-grow extension to the bounce-back loan scheme to give businesses up to 10 years to repay debts. For the hospitality and tourism sectors, the VAT cut to 5% has been extended until spring. In a moment, we'll be hearing from Kate McCann in Westminster. First to our business presenter, Ian King, who's in the city for us. Ian, a big moment for the Chancellor today. Furlough coming to an end, a new package to get us through the winter. What does it look like?
Well, it's considerably less generous than the existing furlough scheme is the most obvious point to make, Sarah. At the moment, an employee is entitled to 80% of their wages for doing nothing. Now they'll have to be working at least a third of their hours, and if they do so, they'll be guaranteed, probably according to the Treasury, some 77% of their wages. Now, it's particularly unfavourable to employers, interestingly enough, because at the moment the employer is making a substantially lower contribution to their employees' salary, some 20%. Well, this rises to 55% under the new scheme, which is worth pointing out. It's actually much, much less generous than the scheme in Germany, on which Mr Sunak's new scheme has been based. The German scheme, of course, credited with avoiding big job losses in the aftermath of the financial crisis a decade ago. It's an idea that's been picked up and run with by Rishi Sunak. But as I say, the government support scheme that's been unveiled today is substantially less generous than the scheme in Germany on which it was based. I find that very interesting. And there are certainly concerns which the Chancellor did nothing to try and run away from in his press conference a moment ago, that this is still going to lead to a big rise in unemployment. Now, the Chancellor didn't say how big the rise in unemployment would be on the back of this. He merely referred people to the Bank of England's forecast, which is around 7.5% joblessness, and the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility. Well, under their most optimistic scenario, unemployment rises to 9.7%. So either way, you're probably looking at a big rise in unemployment. It's difficult to say precisely how much, but looking at some of the forecasts that are starting to drop into my inbox from economists around the city, we're looking at, for example, Simon French over at Pamela Gordon. He says that he was modelling a rise of 1.5 million in the unemployment total between now and the end of the year. He says this will probably bring that down by between a quarter and a third. But either way, you're still looking at probably an increase in unemployment of over 1 million. Well, that's undoubtedly the biggest measure. Other measures include an extension of the VAT, temporary cut in VAT for hospitality businesses. That will last until the end of the financial year now. There are deferrals for the self-employed in terms of when they have to pay their self-assessment tax bills. And there have been an extension to the various government loan schemes, which have already paid out something like £58 billion in support to businesses up and down the country. That money, of course, has to be repaid sometime. And there's been a lot of anxiety among banks here in the city that they're ever going to see that money back, because the government guarantees only last so so long. So those were the main measures. There was nothing on business rates relief, which is something that I think will be of great concern to the retail sector in particular. But worth pointing out that big set-piece moment, Sarah, right at the opening when Mr Sunak was unveiling his speech. He was flanked by Francis O'Grady of the TUC and by Dame Carolyn Fairbairn from the CBI. Very unusual to see those two in public, and variously hinting that they were supportive of this measure. I mean, it was quite an astute political move to get both the TUC and the CBI on side, I feel, for this, and accordingly, it's why you're seeing some. There you go. You can see the pictures now. Dame Carolyn Fairbairn there on the right of the screen. Francis O'Grady from the TUC on the left-hand side of the screen. As I say, very, very interesting that they were involved in the presentation of that speech. To get the employers and the unions on side is no small matter, and it's very striking that not only has the CBI been very favourable of this, but so have the Federation of Small Businesses and the British Chambers of Commerce, because, of course, it's their members ultimately who are going to be making these very, very difficult decisions about whether they make people unemployed or not.